Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Work, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of 2 books, a leadership trainer, and speaker on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. Now, in this episode, we're going to discuss the importance of having clear agreements to building safe, trusting relationships, both one-on-one and in groups. But as you're going to hear, these agreements must also be accompanied by a process for how we will hold each other accountable to the agreements. This is really important, vital stuff. We also talk about the power that leaders have to give people both the permission and protection to really be themselves and take chances at work. Now, this is a game changer if you want to invite and liberate your people to give their best at work. And my guest this week is Craig Forman. Craig is the founder of Culture C Consulting, where he helps organizations evaluate and transform their workplace culture. In specifics, Craig is an expert in designing and deploying employee listening programs that help leaders make decisions about how to foster a more effective culture. Craig is a proud Air Force veteran who lives in the Bay Area with his wife and 2 daughters. And just a heads up before we get started, this episode includes a bit of profanity, so if that kind of language bothers you, you might want to skip this one. Otherwise, please enjoy my conversation with Craig Forman. Craig, thank you for joining me for this.
Mr. Lauritsen, I would not pass up an opportunity that comes from you. It was a quick yes, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, let's get straight into it. I like to start with a little let's get to know a little bit about Craig and how he thinks about relationships. And so I think the first question I'm going to ask is, what quality you most value in a friend?
I thought about this, and I know you asked for one, but I'm going to give you 3 things that came to mind. One is I can trust your word. I just think and when I thought about it, that to me is just kind of really about safety. I mean, but with a friend, if I'm unsure that I can trust what you tell me, personally, that's a big one for me, and it falls into my value set. The second one is consistency over time. So I think it kind of is an add-on to the first one which I think speaks to this idea of like friendship. Often the depth, there's an equation that's time, and that can't be replaced. So that your actions and your words align, and the more that happens over time. And then the third was unique for me, and what I thought about was just grace with me. I think that I'm unique. I'm high energy. I have ADHD. I think I bring a lot of value to relationship, but I know that I can be intense at times, and my best relationships are people that hold space for that, understand, are willing to give me feedback, and just like let me be me. And if I am too much or whatever, like they'll just say like, whoa, Craig, like coming on strong, like, okay, thanks. I just love when people are honest with me. It helps me. And I think I do think it's a part of what I've learned over time is my ADHD and how that means that sometimes the way my brain works and I operate can be tricky. But my best friends really, I've always appreciated it and hold space, and they know they can give me feedback and honesty. So those were the ones that came up for me.
Nice. That's a really clear and powerful set. So thank you for sharing that. So now I'm going to ask what's become one of my favorite questions in general with people is, what is something that you learned about relationships growing up that still shapes how you think about relationships today?
Well, I'm sure I could dig and think about different ways to answer this, but what comes to mind immediately is that I didn't learn a lot of great stuff about relationships growing up. I didn't have good modeling. I had a father who dealt with depression, was a Vietnam vet. I didn't know differently, but I didn't see him really model great relationships. They kind of came and went. There was a lot of moving around. I think my mom was a hairdresser. So what she modeled was kind of those quick relationships. There's always like her job was basically all these, she just loved the like high level, surface level stuff, which was good. I got something from that. But when I thought about this question, it was later in life. It was my time at LinkedIn what came to me. And one of the values of LinkedIn was relationships matter. And I know it sounds, it's corporate-y, but I saw LinkedIn use the tool internally. I really integrated that idea of relationships matter. And moving forward, I think that's just, it's something that seems to constantly validate me and my work, and relationships matter. And I think I guess I'll leave it at that at a high level. The other one that I think that I've really picked up in my life, which hits on what I mentioned before, was the idea of accountability, integrity. I think accountability is the alignment of our actions and our words. It's more of a dynamic between our relationships, and then integrity is more of a personal thing. Are my words and actions aligned? Am I in integrity? Those have become really important things to me, and it's what I expect of myself, and really kind of what I look in my relationships of others. And if those aren't being met, of all the things I'm willing to give a pass on, when those things aren't going well, I find myself really retreating and not being willing to get in a relationship.
That's probably one of the reasons you and I clicked when we met or have stayed in contact. Is your list is very similar to mine. Integrity is one of the core values, and and I think actually for me that's something that started very, very early in my life. I think I grew up with that. I don't know that I adopted that or learned that. That was sort of put in my DNA, but I think you and I share that in common. That probably that makes sense to me, that is a bonding piece for us probably. So
Yes, I didn't know that. So, yeah, that we're so aligned in that way. And when you say it that way, I can feel it in our interactions. Where I know when you tell me you're straight, you're honest, I can just sense that integrity and accountability from you. I know if you tell me something, you're doing it, and that's important to me.
And that kind of feedback's important to me. So thank you. I think I feel that I'm drawn to people that operate and travel through the world that way too, I think. So that makes sense. That's why we're here probably, or part of a reason we're here. Okay, one more sort of get to know you question, Craig. What is the best advice you've ever heard about relationships?
I read this, I thought about this, and there was one that came to mind quickly. I'm sure if I dug, there'd be others, but I really was excited to share this one. I heard this once, and it has always stuck with me, and I think it's a good framework. And that is, it was a saying, and it's friends for a reason, friends for a season, friends for life. And I think as I've gone through the world, it's helped me not put, I think I put all of my friend or connection, one size fits all in everybody. And when I had this, I realized, there are times that relationships come for a reason, and that's okay, and how to honor and treat that. Some are for a period of time, and that's okay. And some are those unique ones that are for life. And I think it's helped me not put too much weight or get angry if a friend for a reason situation happens and they didn't become friends for life. And so I don't know. It's just, and I've gone back to it. I've coached people around it, and it's been really important for me. So I was really excited to share that in this context, because I think it's unique and something that really has shaped a lot of how I think about friendship.
Yeah, I love that, and it's been true for me. I mean, one of the things that I had to learn to embrace, especially as someone who has moved. I mean, I moved across a lot of jobs early in my career, kind of different organizations, different jobs, is that I would make these friends at work. And then it seemed like as soon as I left the work context, I wasn't there anymore. All of a sudden, all these friends were just gone. Or, I mean, the first time I think this really hit me was when I got married early. This is my starter marriage, right out of college, moved to my future ex-wife's hometown with her. Like we moved down to there. So she had all of her friends. And so I had this immediate friend group. And then when we got divorced, suddenly I was in a city with no friends. Like my entire social network was gone. And that's fine. It is what it is, right? Friends for a season, friends for a reason. But then you find your friends for life. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
I get angry at people leaving. You're like, that was friends for a reason. Like there was a reason we were together. And the truth is that thing has disappeared. So the bonds, and they're not bad. They're not mean. It's not about you.
No.
It's how it works.
No. And you know what? I spent some really fun times with those people and I enjoyed it. And just because we're not friends anymore doesn't mean that time didn't still matter or wasn't enjoyable. I just think it's interesting how sometimes we rewrite our relationships in the past with people based on how it came out. And it's like, that's a choice you're making. You don't have to choose to see it that way. So that's a good one. Thank you for sharing that. So let's let's transition. I just as a reminder to if you're listening, that each time in these conversations, I ask my guests to think about two different relationships that are positive and healthy in their life that we can mine for some learning, right? That we can kind of pull apart or dig into to try to pull out some insights and some learning. And so, Craig, I asked you to come prepared to talk about two different things, a personal relationship and a work relationship. And so let's start with the personal relationship. Who are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, I approached this a little differently as I was thinking about it. And there was a relationship in my life that's been really important and special. And I think it holds for this conversation, but it's not about an individual, it's about a group of individuals. And that is, well over 10 years ago now, I formed a men's group. And the men's group still exists. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. After about 10 years, I left the original one, but then some of the people that started the original one formed another one. So it still feels like a continuation. That's a relationship and a friendship that I think holds all of the uniqueness, and there's a lot in it that I think can be extracted about relationships in general. But it's been such a powerful relationship for me. Yeah, so it's sitting in a men's group has been the relationship and a friendship and all of the above that's been really powerful for me.
And that's a great, I love that you brought this example because it's a little different example and I love it. What do you value most about what you get from this group or what happens in this group?
A couple things, and I think it's what we hit on already. One is it's consistent. It's always, part of the foundations was a framework of how we're going to relate with one another, which quite frankly, sometimes in relationships, I think I said that before about the trust and consistency for me, that probably in any great relationship, if you're willing to sit down and have boundaries, probably in our bigger relationships, marriages and those sorts of things, but this relationship had a structure. We had an agreement and a commitment to one another that if we were available, we're going to be there. And what that meant was that I could trust it was consistent. Also, the structure provided honesty. We have a framework where we're able to be honest with one another, and we come with the intention of showing up honestly so we can strip away some of the masks. So I think, you do that enough time over consistency. I know I show up there. Not everybody in the circle might be a buddy of mine, but as a collective, it's supportive, it's there, it's consistent, it's not going to drop me and I'm not going to drop it. And I've grown so much. So I guess maybe that's a great piece of any sort of long-term friendship is what does it bring you? And it has literally changed my life to have a group of people over such a long period of time going through the trials and tribulations of my own, but also witnessing the trials and tribulations of others, which allows me to do growth and work and provide value to them when I can. And then they're there to provide value to me. So maybe it's also the reciprocity in the relationship, that it's as much about give as it is about take. I think it's what I like is the framework and structure. I think it goes back to my ADHD brain does like some structure. Otherwise, I'm not always sure where the boundaries are. I know what I can expect. We have a framework on how we're going to treat one another. I know we're safe there. These are men, and sometimes people can get loud or aggressive, but our framework allows people to show up that way, where everybody still knows we're safe and it's okay and we support one another, which I think is important. Like in workplaces, if you don't know how safe is this, who is this person that's losing their temper right now, but in a framework where it's okay, we can hold space. You can lose your temper. Like we know how it's going to look. That's so it allows for the fullness. So all parts of ourselves are welcome. We've created a space that's supportive for everybody, that we have intention on why we get together. It's consistent and it's there for me when I need it, and I'm there for it when it needs me.
So I'm curious because I think this is a really valuable and important point is you talked about how the structure of it is what creates consistency. The structure of it is what invites the honesty. The structure of it is what makes it safe for some of these things to happen. So can you talk about what does that structure look like? Are there written principles? Do you have ground rules? How is the structure set? Without sharing whatever's appropriate to share, but I'm just curious if you can tell us a little bit about how did that structure evolve and what does it look like?
Yeah. So I'll start at a high level and say, what would I extrapolate from this that I'd say holds with an individual relationship, and that's agreements. They can be implicit or explicit. I think sometimes in one-to-one relationships, we can trust ourselves sometimes that we just have over time and consistency that whatever, I know how you're going to show up. But In the case of the group, they have to be a little more explicit because there's agreements. What supported this?
Can I ask, Craig, are those written out? Like, is there
they are.
Okay.
They were written out with that first 10 years because a group of us decided to continue to get together and not. Our first group was open, meaning we had agreements. They're explicit. We welcome people in and we'd share those agreements. The second group was we decided there was a small group of us. We just wanted to kind of keep it closed. We lean on the fact that our agreements we carried over, but there were agreements. There were agreements about about being there on time, about being there sober, about safety, that you won't hurt yourself or anybody else. We tried to keep our agreements as, in the beginning, this is funny. We got into in the forming stage, it was like rules and all these agreements. And eventually we said we just pared it back to what are the most core ones. One was like, if I'm in town, if I'm around, I make this a priority, about being there, on time, about safety, about confidentiality, because we're asking people to share and be open. So we want to be explicit about that, and that we won't share who's there, and we want to create a safe environment. And where did those come from? I mean, I think it's important to say that, gosh, it's probably 13 or 14 years ago now. Just in my own journey, I did a retreat. I'd never done anything like it. It was a men's retreat. Some family members recommended it. I saw it was happening. I just had 2 little kids. I just wanted something. Honestly, it could have been a lot of things. That's where I landed. And it's a global organization. And the reason I share that is that our circles, it's super decentralized. We run it, but we've adopted, because they had a framework, and we adopted that framework to get going. That helped us create the structure. We built our own along the way, but I have to say that we did adopt some stuff that was given to us that helped us get started.
That's really powerful. And I want to come back. We'll park that for a minute, because I want to revisit that practice as something that I think is really helpful in the work context. So we'll come back to that in a bit. Are there any other, as you think about the journey, the last, 10 years or more with this group, are there some lessons or a key lesson that you would pull out of your experience there about either building and fostering relationships one-on-one, or even relationships within a group, like some sort of key things or key insights that you could share that you actually maybe even have taken and applied elsewhere?
Well, first of all, there's a lot, because that work came before a lot of my professional development. And depending how deep you want to go, that some of what I learned there personally integrated eventually came back through in my work, but I had to repackage it. So we can talk about that. But what comes to mind on a more specific level is leave it better than you found it. And what I mean by that is, so after I did that retreat, the organization says, hey, there are these circles around the country, around the globe, find one, continue. If this was good, continue. Well, when I got home, I didn't find one that worked for me. So it was the first time in my life I did something like this. I raised my hand and said, I want to start one. A couple guys showed up that were in my area that it worked, the same kind of constraints, times, all that. And we started it. It was the first time I ever built anything like it. And after 10 years, so this is where I'm going with that, is I was starting to feel a little bit like it was shifting and changing my life. I was moving around a lot more, but then COVID hit, and I felt a pull to stay with it, because I felt at that time if I left it, I always told myself that if I ever left, I wanted it to continue on, because it was serving and supporting others. COVID hit, and I stayed with it. I helped organize Zoom for a while. Then we started meeting outside only. It was a little further from my house. Where I'm going with this is that after about 10 years, I decided to leave that group, and it was really hard. But I always said, leave it better than you find it. I also said that I knew my work there would be complete if I could leave it and it was still there to support others. It changed. I changed. So I think the lesson there, maybe it's that friends for a reason, friends for a season, but I did it thoughtfully. I processed with the group and said, here's how I'm feeling. I took 3 months away to see, was I wrong? How did it feel? I returned after 3 months. I said, here's where I landed. This is what's best for me. And then I left, and I wasn't quite sure, but I knew that was the right answer. And then about 7 or 8 months later, a couple people that I'd gotten to know over the years reached out and said, do you want to do something a little smaller? and we've recreated a version that works for my life today. So I think the lesson is maybe being open. I think the Buddhists talk about that. No relationships forever, really any of them, even the ones for life, come to an end. One of us is going. So I think it was how to do that with grace and not be angry and not make it about them. I think we do that sometimes, where to separate the relationship, we have to figure out something bad to make us feel good about why we're leaving. And then we create tension versus I honored and loved that 10 years. The fact that they meet every week out in the redwoods in Northern California brings me such joy, and that it's still thriving and men are getting support that they need. I'm okay. And I think sometimes this holding on to things can be a problem. And when I let go, not knowing what was next, and kind of like it just felt right, but also scary. And by letting go, something else showed up, and I'm really grateful for what I have today as well. So maybe it's just that. It's just trust, let it be what it's supposed to be, and let it go through the journey. Same with our jobs, our relationships, our people at work, even our marriages. Like you've had two marriages. And can we love and honor the relationships? What do they teach us versus walking away with anger and resentment to make us feel better about the end of a relationship?
Yeah. Well, don't you think so much of that is because it's really difficult work to honor your own needs and to be able to stand in the integrity of being like, you know what, I'm changing, and this is going to be difficult, right? To say this, but this isn't working for me anymore. And it's maybe not that any of you have changed or anything's wrong. It's just I'm different, and owning that and having those conversations and dealing with sort of other people's reaction to that sometimes is complicated. As you were talking, I was thinking, you could go back and replace, the men's group with my job in that narrative that and I think there's a bunch of people that are trapped in their job because they can't face that decision. It's like, it's not bad enough that I can villainize it to convince myself to go, but I know it's not working for me anymore. So there's a lot of stuff in there. So thank you for that. That was beautiful. This webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. I do want to make sure we have time to talk about this other relationship I asked you to think about. So I asked you to think about a relationship that was born through work that has had a positive, healthy impact on you. And so I'm curious who we're going to talk about in this one.
Oh gosh, this was an interesting one. There's so many, as you know, Jason. Like one of the things I did when I was at Culture Amp was I helped build our community, which honestly came like a lot of the roots of what I learned in forming the men's group got repackaged and helped me think about how to build communities around the globe. But of all those relationships, the truth is the one that came up for me first that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to use a name, was a woman named Jennifer Cullen, who's led our people science team when I first got to Culture Amp. I was at a kind of pivotal part of my career, I think, in a transition, and it wasn't a long relationship. We probably worked together for a year and a half or 2 years, but it was the first one that came to mind. So that was one I wanted to talk about.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about it. Like, what was it that makes it so memorable or impactful?
So when I got to Culture Amp, I think looking back, I had gotten a lot of the Legos or the building blocks, I think, together. I had done my personal work. I had done my master's degree. I had been working at doing customer service and client success work in the space of HR and employee engagement. But I was really excited about this role, but it was the first time it brought it all together and put me in a position of more of a thought leader and strategic. And I was excited I knew it was where I wanted to go, but the reality was I also had not sat in that position very much. So Jennifer it was the support, and it was the ability to, like, I think she saw that. She saw the raw talent. She saw what I wanted. And remember, I had come from LinkedIn. There are a lot of things that I brought into that role. And this is, we're going back 7 or 8 years. But the reason I say LinkedIn is because when I got to Culture Amp, what I saw around me was a lot of these people that were organizational psychologists that had a research background. I went professional studies, and I worked, so I was always on the practitioner side of things, and I was so excited to be there. But at the same time, there's some imposter syndrome, and they were all writing white papers and articles and research. And I was like, man, I don't know. But what I started doing was shooting videos and posting content, and they were sending me to conferences. And I was like, I love this, but I don't want it to go away. How do I make value? So I started doing content from that, and I could tell it was like received, but also rocking the boat a little bit. Like, here I am working for this company, but then I'm out on LinkedIn, like starting to get attention. And so I went to Jennifer and I said, is this okay what I'm doing? And I mean, and what she said to me, and I think that the crux of this relationship, she said, as a leader, she said to me, you do you, I'll tell you if there's a problem. Like, she basically said, I got you. I'll be your cover. I trust you. If you mess up, I'll let you know. But she gave me the permission to move and to be bold, and that if there's an issue, something would happen, versus leaving me in a state. And I think a lot of people in the workplace of uncertainty and fear, with the leaders that are uncertain and fear, and no one really moves. And because it was me, I went for it. And I just feel like so much shifted after that. It allowed me to lean into my purpose, which helped the world work better by improving the places we work. It allowed me to interpret my role and my work in my own way, and to take chances, and to know that I had a manager that had my back, and that that I was aware that she was giving me cover, so I wasn't gonna do anything to intentionally, stain her work. It was it was such a gift. And you know what? Like, a year later, she's at Visa now, leading global OD or whatever, but she's so grateful. And I think she knows this, I've told her this, but it wasn't a big, robust friendship. It was a friend for a season, maybe a reason. But as a leader, I'm just forever really grateful that she gave me that space, because then I got to, it was like I was a seedling coming out and I got to blossom, and you can't go back from that point. And she gave me the shade and the nutrients and the support I needed to do that stage. And that, I think that if I had other managers or a different stage, it could have been shut down. So that came to mind for me, and just really grateful for her and what she offered me.
A great story, and a great example of leadership, and how often we think about trust needing to be earned, and in this case, it's sort of like she extended trust to you. And there's such a power in when you have, I hear it from you, is like when your leader gives you that trust and permission and freedom, it creates such then commitment to not let them down, right? To really deliver for them. And I think so many leaders misunderstand. Like, they want the employee to prove they're worthy of that before they give it to them. And that ends up, like you said, the employees are more in fear, and they're second guessing and uncertainty. So they don't perform as well. And then they never do blossom, at least not as fully as they could. And so what a great example. And I'm curious, as you had that experience, what have you taken from that experience that you have then sort of used in other relationships, or applied to your relationships with others?
Well, two things. One is tactical, and one's a little more meta. The tactical one is, I have used that line with people that I've had that have worked around me or for me, or I had the ability to provide cover of, you go do you, I'll let you know if there's a problem. It's such a freeing thing to say to somebody, especially people that are around you come to you saying, is it okay if I do this or that? So in most organizations, if you've come a long way, even if you're not this uber duper leader, you probably people around you, more junior people, asking that you can offer that sort of support, saying, like, I understand this place. Like, I see what you're trying to do. Just keep doing it. I got you. I'm keeping an eye on you, and I'll let you know if there's a problem. But, like, free them up to be them. And I think it's that direct. Of what she gave me helped highlight it, the value for me, and I just interpreted that, and how can I offer that to others? There's something more meta that, it's funny, I didn't connect the dots until you asked me, but it's been lately. I've been doing some work with some rather large organizations, and some organizations that are known for, like, hiring the best. And I've heard these themes of we hire the best, and then we have these low performers that undermines, what we do here. We need to deal with that. And I keep thinking, you probably do hire this idea that just because you hired the best, they're going to flourish. And if we didn't, we must have messed up and hired the worst. And I'm thinking, I bet you're just going to keep doing this because just because you have the most high power seed that's been most genetically engineered, you put it in shit soil, it's not going to grow. So I think it's just a reminder of like, what's the environment, and stop like blaming. It just feels like so often it's so easy to externalize and blame. We hired poorly. We did this and that. I'm like, no, you got as good as it gets. I know this organization. I know they're known. There's no better. Like they get the best. They pay the best, and then they complain about like low performers. And I understand at any individual level it's frustrating, but I'm like, there's a systemic issue. You do have the best. And maybe some just don't work there and they need to move on. But also, you and I have talked about that in the farming, like just because you hire the best, you just expect that it's going to be the best, as if you have no responsibility to provide the soil and the infrastructure for it to blossom. So I think that's the more meta thing that I think about when I hear people, and this is your world, but when I hear people kind of talk about performance in that way, as if they have it's just performance is you hire the best and that's the end of it.
Farmers never blame the seeds for a poor harvest. They just don't. Master gardeners don't blame the seeds. They just don't. They understand that the work is in the cultivation. The work is in all the things you've mentioned. So absolutely. That's a great lesson. So thank you. And, right on brand. So I appreciate that. All right. So let's bring it home, because I think there's some really great stuff here that I want to bring it back kind of to the workplace, right? And how we can use some of these. And I mean, we've already talked a little bit about it. We've gotten ahead of ourselves even a little bit. You talked that example you just provided about how you can sort of give other people that confidence to. It's funny because, as you're saying that, one of the things I've always said is, I feel like one of my gifts has been over the years giving other people permission to be something that they want to be, that they didn't really need permission to in the first place. But when someone externally sort of gives them that invitation, then they feel more comfortable stepping into it. And that's really what it is, right? People don't really need permission. You were already doing it, but it certainly made you more comfortable and confident in doing it. It's interesting the power of just a bit of permission it can have on another human being.
I agree. But when you say that, I think about the circle, and I think sometimes we have such an emphasis on individual. Yes, I could have, but I don't want to undermine how we need each other. Like there's something beyond just, oh, Craig, you had it all along. That acts as if we're not playing in this world where there's so many dynamics and have people around us say, go for it. I got your back. I see that in you. And I think that's the circle to me of like, I had a lot of stuff in me when I showed up to the circle, but I also had a lot of things I couldn't see that I needed others to support me with, and you've been that for me along the way, Jason. I mean, I think about my first keynote. You didn't know me that well, but you freaking helped me out. And after that, boom, I was doing keynotes all over the place. Did I have it in me? Of course I did. Did I need you? Yeah. Like you were an important part. So I just want to make sure that we honor both sides, that there's nothing weak about people. We need each other. We need each other. And I think we're not, the story of us being so fucking individual. Sorry, I'm cussing. I'm getting worked up. That sometimes it takes away. I'll give you an example, like self-care. Like I love the concept and we talk about self-care, and it's true. We got to take care of ourselves. But I feel like oftentimes we end there in our workplaces and in most of our lives. And I think the next level, and this is the circle, it's shared care. Like we do take care of ourselves, like the oxygen mask, so we can be okay. But to what end? To just take care of ourselves? And I think that's that individualistic side. But take care of yourself so we can create a support group to like be there to take care of those that are like, to hand them the oxygen mask when they need it. So I think both are important. And I wanted to call that out, that there's nothing wrong. We need each other. We are social creatures. We are pack animals. There's really something primitive in what you said about that support we offer each other. And like, we will wither and die if nobody's around us telling us it's safe and it's okay.
And I totally agree with that. And I guess I didn't mean to suggest that people don't need that. But I think what I'm saying is that I think we miss the opportunity to give that invitation to greatness and authenticity and all the things to other human beings all the time. Like you think about just when you interact, like I always love when you get a chance to you interact with someone in a whatever kind of setting, a retail setting or someone, a server or a bartender that you're, being served by who are just exceptional at their job, right? Or they're incredible at whatever. And you can just be like, you know what, you are great at this. Or you see somebody doing something that you're just like, this is really amazing that you're doing that what you're doing is incredible. And just to see the impact that has on them, or, inviting someone like, you should really pursue this because this is something like that can change a person's life. And so that's more so to me, it's more the onus on, like, they don't necessarily, like, you wish we lived in a world where we didn't need that invitation or that permission. Like, they don't need permission to do that. What I'm sort of putting the onus on is on us as individuals to more freely give that to others, because it costs nothing. And it might change somebody's life.
In a world that's so full of transactions, and even myself, how sometimes I notice I withhold that. It costs nothing. Like in a world where things cost shit and we can change lives, and guarantee, Jason, you and I have probably both touched and impact people will never know. And every once in a while we get a little window, somebody reflects back, like I just did to you about the keynote. And the irony in a world where everything costs so much and like resources are limited, it's endless. It'll endlessly support and provide. So I'd ask anybody, myself included, when do you withhold that from others, and can you go further to give more of that? And what does it cost you? And what I think is that if we don't feel whole, if we're insecure, we're less likely to give to others because our needs aren't being met. So, but on the flip side, I realize that if your needs aren't being met, go give, and all of a sudden, in a weird way, your needs start getting met.
Indeed. So that is a great takeaway. I think to everybody in any context, that is a great takeaway. The other thing that I want to sort of go back and just talk about a minute is I want to circle back to kind of the men's group and the power of the agreements and the power of the structure and what that achieved. And I'm curious because I know, like, obviously you've applied it in lots of different ways now, but like, let's talk a little bit about very specifically, where can you take that insight, that lesson, and apply it to create a better work experience? And if you have any sort of tips or ways you've applied it very specifically, I would love to hear those. I'm sure people would love to get a little guidance here on what they could do with that.
Well, here's one. And I think it ties to probably one of the biggest challenges that I see inside of workplaces that is never fully gets addressed. So I talked about accountability and integrity. That a lot of that came from really my thoughts on that, how I approach it. A big part of the men's circle and what we did take from the bigger organization is this emphasis on accountability and integrity. I mean, I think if you talk about men, particularly, that our actions and our words are aligned, that our actions have impacts intended or unintended, that and so a core part of that is the group kind of holds each other accountable, so to speak. So where I want to go with that is that I think it's a real, and I've worked with some great organizations. I'm kind of shocked at now that I've processed what accountability means and how bad, and how many leaders talk about it, and I don't believe really embodying the idea of accountability. And what all that means to me is your actions and your words are aligned. It's about our agreements. And by the way, your agreements can be changed, but it's your job when you realize you have an agreement that can't be met to course correct. So where does that apply into the organization? I think one of the things that the circle has is a framework that we have the opportunity to both address if we're out of that. So we, particularly with one another. So as we're kind of getting together, forming for the week, is anybody having accountability issue with the group? Basically saying like, look, I want to own up that I said I was going to be here on time and I wasn't. So number one, there's space for people to own that because we're humans. We all do it. And we have the opportunity to kind of like clean it up a little bit and realize that me not showing up on time may have an impact on other people here. Like, you were ready to get started and I wasn't here. I should own that and not to be like, oh, well, I had a car trouble. Like, did you plan? Did you know there was traffic? So I think in organizations, what I'd love to see, the problem is, especially when you have power dynamics without a clear set of agreements, like we have a clear process to check in on accountability. And then we have something called support accountability, which is maybe I think, Jason, you had an agreement with me you didn't keep. You didn't mention it when there was an accountability issue. And I have an opportunity to say, Jason, I want to offer this to you to look at. You said you were going to send me that email. You didn't. Now, by the way, you have the choice to say, no, I don't think that's the agreement. It's just not for me to look at tonight, which is fine. I was just offering it. Or you can say, oh, thanks. I didn't think about that. Let's clean that up. So I wish we had more of that in organizations, that we had a process in place that allowed people to surface if they feel like agreements aren't being kept. It undermines so many things. And I wish if there was a structure, it would make it safe for the junior employee and the CEO just the same. If we all agree, this is how it's going to be handled. This is how we get to do it here. This is the process we follow. I think it's so scary and difficult, and it's tension and conflict, and of course, when we're in big groups, we don't want conflict. So unless somebody's there to give a structure and to make it safe through an organized structure that we understand the process and the procedure, people won't surface it. So I wish organizations had more processes in place to hold people truly to accountability and their own integrity around their words and their actions.
It's super interesting and super powerful because you're right. I mean, you hear organizations talk about accountability all the time, but if you press them on what that looks like, it's often not clear at all. And so I think that is an incredible step and recommendation. The other thing I would add on to that is, and maybe we're sort of assuming it, I think in advance of that, is you're assuming agreements are clear and documented and written. And I think so often they are not. And particularly the one place that I would say right now that it's really vital is that if you are in a work environment that is hybrid or remote or is changing in any way in terms of how you work, I think about the intention with which your men's group thought about the experience that you wanted to create and how you wanted people to feel inside of that experience. And then you very intentionally and specifically crafted agreements that would ensure that that is the experience people had. And then you were getting feedback on it and you were iterating. That is exactly what needs to be happening inside of hybrid teams, inside of any team really, but particularly hybrid teams where the way we work and agreements and how we communicate and how we're going to provide feedback and how we're going to collaborate or whatever, those things need to be discussed and captured and documented and updated with the same intention. If you care about creating a good experience, I think that's table stakes. And then you need to add on some clarity about how we're going to hold each other to account for living up to those agreements. So I think those are both super powerful.
Two quick reflections. One is I want to say that I was thinking about what I just said, and that is I think it's easy for somebody to hear that and say, well, my company doesn't do that. My organization doesn't do that. It's so easy when we're doing this work to find reasons why the world's not behaving that way, therefore I'm not. And I would say to anybody, but how can you? It's infectious when you do it and people gravitate towards it. So if you are part of a team, even if your organization isn't, can you embody this at your team level? Can you embody this for yourself first and then of others? And then I think the second thing that you said, and I'll own this too, because I've thought so much and I'm so intentional about agreements and integrity that what I've realized because of my focus on it, that I think we all realize somewhere, I too know how to play. If I'm in a culture where there's low accountability, it provides a lot of wiggle room for me to create scenarios or, I'm aware that the agreements I don't make are important too. I'm saying that because I think people that aren't aware still understand this, that most people live in a world where there's not high alignment of actions and words. And then it creates all this space to create scapegoating, or I didn't really agree to that. So what about that person? So the power, when I make an agreement, I'm very intentional, or I won't make the agreement. So being intentional in your culture about what agreements mean and when we make them, but sometimes I don't make an agreement because I know I can't, I'm so attached to trying to be in integrity that I'm not going to make an agreement I can't keep if I know it. But I'm just calling out that I think somewhere inside of us, this goes beyond words, that when we live in worlds where we're not safe and we can't trust what's being said and done, that it creates a lot of the challenges that low performer who was supposed to be a high performer has. And it's to your point, we have to be very intentional. What are agreements? How do we make them? And we know when I say to you, I'm making that agreement, I know what that means. And I know there's going to be space somewhere that you might call me out if I don't. Therefore, I'm like, shit, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to honor it and change it when I need to. And I'll say that again, we can change our agreements. That's part of the deal here. But we have to be really intentional because we create messes all over the place. And when leaders do it, it says it's okay for other people to do it.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, that's a perfect place to wrap. Craig, this has been awesome. As always, you brought the thunder, some great heart and insights, and I really, really appreciate you making the time to share your experiences with us. This has been great.
You too, Jason. I'll just say that like I do a lot of podcasts. I have my own. It's usually focused on, listening and how to create cultures. I just really appreciate this podcast. I can just feel inside of me the energy, and it was a depth that I don't typically go to on podcasts. And thanks for the conversation. I think you got a lot of goodness out of me for it, and I'm just feeling really good about this. So thank you for doing this and your work.
We'll talk again soon, my friend.
We will.
Take care. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.